So how's life in sunny Los Angeles?
Oh, it's well. It's well. I can't complain. Today is going to be 80, well, your
What?
Celsius. It's 83 degrees
Wow.
Fahrenheit, which
Yeah,
is very warm. It's
yeah.
like summertime temperature. So can't complain.
Looks beautiful outside the window there, the
Yeah.
sunshine on the trees.
Sunshine, green. Yeah.
Wow.
I feel very fortunate.
Oh, brilliant. But besides the film, what do you do to relax? Have you got any hobbies?
Well, I enjoy yoga.
Oh, yeah,
Going on hikes, very much the Southern California thing,
yeah,
cooking,
yeah,
watching movies,
yeah.
um, binging on Netflix, I suppose, catching up on Doctor Who.
Yeah,
Yeah, but I mean, being outside is always really nice, making sure to get out for a walk and just be like, oh, palm trees. I'm very lucky to be here. All right,
yeah,
go back, edit, work.
yeah, yeah. I'm looking outside, the snow on the trees. Well, there isn't actually, it's
Oh,
frost. Thick, I think frost outside, cold weather,
oh, that,
probably
oh, that's
December
nice.
weather.
I'm going to be in the UK for over the holidays, and I'm pretty excited.
Wow, yeah, well, London, I suppose.
Going to, well, London
Yeah.
and then Wales.
Oh, yeah.
In Wales. And yeah, my partner, he's British, so
Oh,
I'm
yeah,
I'm very excited to have a proper Christmas with
yeah,
the snow and the festivities. It's really a treat.
yeah. Well, my daughter, she lives in New Zealand, and the past couple of Christmases they've had it on the beach. It's like an Australian type of thing or a down under thing, but I can't get my head around it. You're supposed to be cold and get warmed up with a Christmas dinner.
Yeah.
I think that's the natural way of things. Mm.
I agree. I agree. So I'm
Yeah.
excited for that.
Whereabouts is your husband from in the UK?
He grew up in Warwickshire,
Oh yeah, yeah,
but then his family's in Tetbury.
yeah.
And he lived in London, kind of was all over the place. He was in the army. He was a major in the army,
Oh yeah,
has done a career shift. He's not doing that anymore.
yeah,
So he traveled all over. But his family now is in Tetbury, but we're going to Wales, which I'm excited because I've never been.
yeah.
And so
Beautiful place.
looking forward to that.
Green. It's as green as Ireland. Everywhere hills, nice, pleasant places to go and see. Beautiful place.
I can't wait. Can't
Uh,
wait.
as I mentioned, you've got many talents. Given the choice, what would be the number one option for you? Acting, directing, editing, maybe all
That
mixture of three.
Well, the very first thing I wanted to be was an actor, an
Yeah,
actress.
yeah,
So that would be the most fun. I love the idea. I don't really act that much anymore. If I do, it's a friend who will cast me in something because the life of an actor is kind of tough, like constant rejection and
yeah,
the auditions and everything like that.
yeah.
But that's the most fun, I would say. And director, editor kind of in a way go hand in hand. I enjoy directing. Editing is the way that I make a living mostly.
Yeah.
And it is informative to the directing process, I would say, because then I could be like, oh, I know I need that shot, or make sure I get this coverage here and there. And it's sort of like editing as you're filming.
Okay. You sort of working like I think of it like in terms of a project manager. You have to arrange for the people, the times people meet up, the places, the locations. What's I don't know when the time people are going to meet, what the lighting's going to be like.
hmm I mean, ideally, especially like with Doctor Who Am I, it was me, Matthew Jacobs, who also wrote The Eighth Doctor, and we
Yeah,
kind of sort of were just like, yeah, let's just make a documentary. And we went out and started shooting with a small crew.
yeah,
And it was a very small crew. And so it would be nice for the next projects to have, um, a producer or other people boots on the ground to sort of like help through the whole process. But because it was mostly the two of us with a very small crew,
yeah,
and learned a lot, but nice to have like a bigger team to make it all happen.
yeah, yeah. Well, we had a chat, as you know, with Matthew a couple of weeks ago. Tell us how you connected and how you who came up with the idea of Doctor Who Am I?
Well, it came up over coffee. I mean, I
Oh,
could back
nice.
up. My undergrad, I studied astronomy.
Yeah,
And then I was in did acting for a bit. Was in a feature and a couple things that were in Tribeca Film Festival.
Yeah.
But then I worked in the music industry and I managed a record label in New York City, which was quite fun and interesting.
Right.
And then I went to film school.
Yeah.
And so that's where I met Matthew, where he was teaching there.
Okay.
And he was working. So while he was my instructor, he shot a couple of features, which I was working with him on. First in the capacity of like an assistant director, and then a co-producer, and then that we just became friends through this whole process. He moved to Los Angeles, and we just have collaborated.
Yeah.
I was also working on my thesis film, which I think you saw, An American Contradiction,
Oh, you've seen that.
which, Matthew was he was editing his feature while I was editing my thesis film, and we are kind of like exchanging notes and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But the idea for Doctor Who Am I was visiting San Francisco, and it was it was after like I had moved away to Los Angeles. I was in San Francisco for a job. My father had just passed away. And so it was sort of like this meeting, just talking about life. And I think Matthew just sort of dropped like how he started getting invited to Doctor Who conventions.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was very confused because even though I'd known him for many years, I never looked at him on IMDb to be like, oh, you wrote Doctor Who. Okay, yeah. So I was just flabbergasted because I have such childhood memories of Doctor Who over
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
The fourth Doctor came out kind of in the 80s on public television. And so I was just like, whoa, you're being invited to Doctor Who conventions. This is amazing. And that was just sort of it, where he's like, didn't want to do it, but he was like, it could be funny because he's like, it could be very funny. I totally don't want to do it, but okay, let's just shoot a documentary. And then in 2 months we were out filming, but right away he knew it would be called Doctor Who Am I?
Yeah.
And so even before we started filming, by the time we were done with our cup of coffee, we already knew the title of the film.
Yeah.
And then 2 months later, we were on this adventure.
Yeah, that's a brilliant documentary. It coincides as well with the BBC on the 60th anniversary of the Doctor Who creation.
Yes, and that wasn't on purpose,
Okay.
but things have just happen for a reason that way.
Yeah.
It really did. It worked out for sure.
Okay.
And we're excited because there's also a lot more interest in Paul McGann, and stuff like that. So it's kind of like it's all worked out perfectly.
Okay. I'm just looking behind you there on the windowsill, the tiny TARDIS. Is that
Oh,
huge
yes.
inside? Have you opened that? Is it like a whole universe
Yes.
inside that?
Yes, this is a whole other part to my place. There you go. That's where my bedroom is. My other office is a dining room. It's quite nice.
Okay. I'm looking at the links on your excellent website, vanessayuille.com. Is that how you pronounce your surname? Yuille.
Yes,
Yuille.
you said it correct.
Oh, good. Makes a change for me. Thank you.
Yeah.
You mentioned this before, An American Contradiction, the short documentary, where you journey back to your mother's birthplace in Wyoming. And this opened my eyes a bit about a part of American history that I knew little about. Can you tell us more about this? Heart Mountain.
Yes. Well, Heart Mountain is one of the 10 American concentration camps that were in the U.S. during World War II.
Were they actually called concentration camps at the time?
They are. At the time they were called concentration camps in early documents, and that's actually definition correct. Yeah. Then they started calling them relocation centers and internment centers. And this is for the Japanese Americans, that there were 120,000 Japanese Americans and Japanese immigrants and they basically forcibly removed them from their homes, gave them, a couple days to pack up all their belongings in a suitcase. They could only bring what they could carry. And then they were sent on trains to remote locations in the US for the duration of the war. So for like 3 years, they were on these camps in the middle of nowhere. And the definition of a concentration camp is when you take an ethnic minority and you confine them, like, and that's what it was. They were internment camps. Internment camps are part of the Justice Department, and those were actually when you had POWs, or people who were considered prisoners of war, were stuck in internment camps. But the correct term is concentration camp.
Yeah.
And what happened to the Jews, those are death camps. So it's sort of like the different euphemisms that we kind of use for these sort of events. And back to American Contradiction, my family, I'm half Japanese. And so my mom was born at Heart Mountain. She was one of the 556 Heart Mountain babies. And so the documentary I bring my mom back there, and it sort of explores what this chapter of American history was, and kind of asks that question of, because it stripped American citizens of their rights. Yeah. And it's like, this could happen again. It sort of comes up in topic a little bit, but it's surprising how many people, especially Americans, don't really even know about this part of history.
Yeah. That must have ripped families apart, literally.
Oh, it did. It did. And also the financial ruin that a lot of families had, selling their homes and their farms for pennies on the dollar. And nobody died. I mean, people did die, but it wasn't like, it wasn't a death camp. But you take someone who's used to Southern California, you're throwing them into a Wyoming winter. They didn't have winter coats or anything. These barracks were initially uninsulated, so then they had to insulate them. You had squelching summers, dust storms, and then the winters were brutal. And the family unit did break down because there were mess halls. You weren't allowed to cook, so kids were separated from their parents, and there was just sort of like, kids would sit together, the parents would sit together. So then certainly of the older generation, they were just kind of like, I just didn't listen. We never had dinner together. We never talked. It was just like, I would just live with my friends or just hang out with my friends, that sort of thing.
I can't imagine how awful that would be. It would seem that place, Wyoming, was chosen purposely because of the tougher climate.
Oh, they chose like Wyoming, Arizona, California, Colorado, all places remote, near a train stops, so they could bring people in, near a water source, as well as near areas that they perhaps wanted to be agriculturally developed.
Oh, yeah.
So then they use the incarcerees. Sometimes people say internees. They use them as cheap labor to then develop the land. So Heart Mountain, now you go there, it's like beautiful farmland, but before it was all just sagebrush and dust.
Is this like a sort of, maybe some kind of like a tourist attraction? Do people go there to look up the history?
Oh yeah. You can, especially Heart Mountain, because it's near Yellowstone, and which is a beautiful park. Also, it's by Cody, Wyoming, which is like this, tourist destination where you have cowboys, there's a rodeo, and then there's another town, Powell. People don't really visit Powell, but it's very cute in its own right, and it's a farming community. They have a university there, so there's a lot to visit. And Heart Mountain has a wonderful learning center there that in the last 10 years, it's kind of remarkable what they've done. They're creating a Heart Mountain Institute, and it's kind of becoming the Heart Mountain itself is becoming a destination for sure.
Okay. I really enjoyed the documentary. It's available on your website.
Oh, thank you.
Also on the website, there's a link where people can see Doctor Who on I know it's on various sort of streaming channels. I think it's available free on Amazon Prime.
Yes, it is. I don't know. It's still on BritBox in the UK.
That's one place I didn't look. I'm not sure if there's not a link to that on your website. I'm going to have a look at that.
We don't have, BritBox here is by a subscription.
Oh, okay.
But that's true. We don't have it listed here, but it is available on BritBox in the UK.
Okay. We talk about your acting experiences. We've spoken to a couple of actors who've told us that auditioning has totally changed post-COVID. Have you had the same experience? Has this changed for yourself?
Well, I haven't been acting for a while,
Yeah,
but I have helped friends like Matthew as well.
yeah,
He was
yeah.
doing acting and doing like the on-camera auditions.
Oh, yeah.
Um, I can't really speak for how much it's changed, though. I could imagine on one hand, mailing in your kind of your tapes
Yeah,
is great because then you don't have to travel. You don't have to deal
true.
with like Los Angeles sort of
Yeah,
traffic. But at the same time, like I'm a perfectionist, so then I would want to do take after take after
oh,
take, and
yeah,
then you
yeah,
have to
yeah,
edit that.
yeah,
Um, so that's what I know is different.
yeah.
Otherwise, I don't have that much experience. If somebody wants to cast me in something, great. That
Yeah.
means I don't have to audition.
Brilliant. Do you know what? I spoke to one actor and he sort of flipped it on its head. He said he was annoyed that people could they could make, I don't know, 10 takes just to get the performance spot on camera, and then send that off to the director or the producer. Whereas in the past, turning up, face to face, you could screw it up, basically. You didn't have 10 goes, you had one chance
Yeah.
only.
I mean, I remember doing that for sure. In some ways, there's a positive and negative for
Yeah,
both
yeah,
because then you show up, you do it, and then you go about your day. Is instead of like trying to get it right every single time. Exactly.
yeah,
Like doing it 10 times and then
yeah.
you think that's it. But maybe it's that
Mm.
spontaneity of walking into the room and that vibe
Yeah,
that
yeah,
they
yeah, yeah,
they get. I mean, I
yeah.
think there's a it's like I said, I'm a perfectionist, so I would do it 10 times, 20 times. But maybe it was the first take that was the best one.
Okay. Yeah. Amongst the films, I know you've got quite a large CV there of documentary films, music videos as well. Have you scripted a feature-length film at all?
Uh, I feel like I'm disappointing you, but
Ah,
I have not. But I will. I have started one. It's just a matter of sitting down and doing it. And the genre is fun because it's like comedy horror, which
yeah.
is completely different than anything
Okay.
that I would do on my CV.
Yeah.
But and it's taken a while because I've written more, I would say, sci-fi
Yeah.
or serious things. But after working on Doctor Who Am I, which is
Mm.
serious, it's dramatic but quite funny. My tone has changed where it's a comedic tone where I think you can find humor in maybe outlandish circumstances if it's horror. But I
Yeah.
mean, even in serious circumstances, that's sometimes how I deal with something that's very serious that's happening in my life is that I
Yeah.
use humor to
Yeah.
kind of work through it. So
Okay.
my stuff has a comedy thread. I will talk to me I'll let you know when I finish it. Definitely
Okay.
going
Brilliant. I'm
to.
going to ask you in 6 months' time. Uh,
Okay.
Going back to Doctor Who, am I? Did you travel around much? I know Matthew said he traveled sort of extensively. Were you turning up in different locations all over the States?
Well, we mostly filmed in Los Angeles, and in Northern California as well, or not Northern, I mean, it's still Southern California and New York, but we did go to these places multiple times.
Yeah.
Um, Went to these conventions over a couple years and, followed our main characters.
Yeah.
And then since the film has come out, we've traveled around
Yeah.
with it. And I'm sure, Matthew's been to Omaha, Nebraska. Now I've been to Omaha, Nebraska. And they're quite nice. We had some really good curry there.
Yeah.
Really, really good curry. So even Matthew is blown away.
Yeah.
Because, you guys make curry better over there. And so yes, we traveled around quite a bit.
Any major auditions lined up? Yeah.
Oh, me? No, no major auditions. Unfortunately, if you know anyone looking for a Japanese American, whatever, please let them know and give them my name.
Is Matthew auditioning for anything? Has he got anything lined up?
No, at the moment, well, yes. I mean, he works quite closely with Bernard Rose,
Yeah, yeah.
who did, yeah, Candyman and Immortal Beloved, and he's kind of a recurring character in Bernard's films.
Hmm.
So I believe there's another film that's coming up next year that he will have a role in.
And for
So
yourself as
that's
well?
what. Oh, me?
Yeah.
No, I won't
Ah,
be in it.
no, no, no.
But
All right.
I was in Traveling Light.
Yeah.
And that was shot during COVID, and I got to be in it. I didn't end up on the cutting room floor,
Oh,
which is exciting.
That's always
And
good.
so I'm like, oh, yeah, last year I can say I had 2 movies in the theaters. So
brilliant.
that was very cool.
That's true. Yeah.
Excellent stuff.
Hmm.
So how do you get funding for your work then? Is it through going to awards festival or winning awards at festivals, or is it do
Oh,
you have to beg,
that
steal, and borrow basically? Or
That is a brilliant question. Well, through Doctor Who Am I, we did have an investors, we did some crowdfunding, but it was mostly self-funded. And I don't exactly want to do that again. So my next project, I'm getting grant money for
Excellent.
it, and which of course like takes longer instead of just being like, I'm gonna go shoot a movie, and then you start shooting, and then you're like, wait a minute, how am I gonna pay for this movie? Um, Independent filmmaking, and you learn. So yeah, I think especially for documentaries, there is grant money. Everybody is vying for the same thing.
yeah, yeah.
And that's certainly what I hear. So that's why my next project, though, will be about the Japanese American camps, because I can sort of get funding through that route, especially since I have family and a direct connection to it. And so that next project is kind of what I'm working on, which is kind of exciting. It's about this family in Los Angeles that for 5 generations has owned a mortuary. They're Japanese American. And so they're telling the story of this mortuary. Even just this topic of death and everything makes people interested. But their family members were incarcerated at Heart Mountain. The grandfather was a World War I veteran who went into the camps in his uniform, in his World War I uniform. So it's quite a rich story to be told there. And the guy who owns the mortuary is quite funny. This short won't be depressing because they run a mortuary, but more it's kind of like a celebration of life and community. And, people will learn about the incarceration through this unique lens of a family who's run a mortuary for 5 generations. No.
Vanessa, that sounds to me like your full-length film.
I know, and I'm like,
You
oh,
do
this is
this as
going
your
to be a
calling
short.
card.
This is going to be a
No,
short, but
that's just the
people are like, there's too much in this story. I'm like, it will be a challenge.
You mentioned Steve asked about funding for the features. How do you what social media works to sort of help with getting the funding into place or to help promoting the work? What works best for you?
In terms of getting funding.
Yeah, or in terms of sort of promotion and sort of getting the name maybe out there. Is it Facebook, Twitter, TikTok? Do you use these
Well,
platforms?
for a completed film, I would say social media has been our best friend,
Yeah,
especially in terms of for Doctor Who Am I, the community of, our first target audience obviously would be people who know Doctor Who.
yeah,
And even though the documentary, you don't need to know anything about Doctor Who. We keep telling people that you don't need to know anything.
yeah.
And so that community really lives heavily in social media
Of
on
course.
like Twitter and
Yeah,
Facebook, less to a lesser degree, Instagram. So that's kind of where we've been pushing
yeah,
a lot to get the word out there. But in a funding phase, I mean, I guess the same thing would be sort of social media. That would be helpful, or just sort of applying to as many grants as you can. And usually the people who get grant money have sort of like a cause behind it.
yeah.
We weren't very successful with getting grants with Doctor Who Am I because it was sort of pop culture, and
Yeah,
so
too
we kind
commercial.
of Yeah, too commercial.
Yeah.
So we kind of had to go the self-funding and mostly self-funding, but find some people who would give money route.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I suppose it's tough, isn't it? Because the more successful you are, the easier it is to get funding because
True.
people want to fund you then.
Yes.
It's so difficult when you're not so, or maybe not so famous or whatever. It's
Right.
difficult to get on that ladder, I suppose, isn't it? Is that
Yes.
about right?
Totally. That's very true. Because it was my first documentary. I hadn't edited a documentary before or hadn't done a feature. So, once it's completed, then it's like, well, I did this. Versus before, people are kind of like, oh, what have you done for me to give you money? So it's true. We did have
that
a bit as well.
Okay, then finally from me, I know I haven't been on long, but what advice would you give to someone coming into this game for the first time, a new actor or a new editor or director or someone doing what you're doing? What would you tell them the best way to go about it?
Wow, that's a big question. Well, I guess it starts with, passion. I think go into it for the right reason. You want to do it because you want to create, right? It's not necessarily the fame or it's not the attention that you want. You want to do it because this is sort of your calling. Because people will throw you curveballs, especially if you're an actor. You're gonna be rejected a lot, so you have to kind of be confident in yourself and be confident of your artistic expression in order to kind of get through all of that rejection. Because if you want fame, if you want to be in front of the camera and that's all you want, but you're not getting it, you're gonna get yourself down pretty quickly. I would say it's a noble endeavor, whatever you want to do. And even if it is, it's not what you envisioned, you get a normal job, you have income and you're doing your creative outlet in another way that is just as noble and great as if you're, I don't know, doing something else of what your perception of what you wanted. So I would say journey for everyone, and there's no one way, but be confident in yourself and do it for the right reasons.
Sounds like good advice. Yep.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Excellent. Yeah. But Vanessa, I'm afraid time has caught up with us. But it's been an absolute delight. I really appreciate your time. It's been great chatting with you.
Oh yes, it's been wonderful. Thank you so much.
And we're going to book now for 6 months in advance. And you're starting the screenplay tonight. Got it.
Okay, right. I'll get back and dig it out.
And I'll try and get on time for that one.
Oh, it's okay. It totally happens. I've done it enough times.
Brilliant. Right, Vanessa, for now, thanks very much.
All right. Thank you so much, Terry. Thank you so much, Steve.
Bye.
All right. Bye.